Hello everyone, my name is Connor Hoffman, and today my presentation will be on the possible ascendancy of Brazil to superpower status in the international system. As a result of World War II, two of the victors, the United States and the Soviet Union, became what we refer to as superpowers. A superpower is defined as an extremely powerful nation that is capable of influencing international events and the acts and policies of less powerful nations. To be qualified as any sort of superpower, the nation must have a very strong presence in at least one of these fields: economic, political, military, or cultural presence. The US and the Soviet Union were the only countries that were able to meet all of these characteristics in the 20th century. With the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the United States became the sole superpower of the world for most of the 1990s and the 2000s. Entering the 2010s, many have started to predict there are new potential superpowers. These new potential superpowers are China, Brazil, India, and Russia, and have been nicknamed BRIC. In order to gain an understanding of what a superpower should possess, in order to be classified as a superpower, we must look at the current superpower, the United States. The United States has the world's largest economy, spends the most on its military, and has one of the largest militaries, has numerous technological resources, and also tons of natural resources. The U.S. GDP in 2012 was $16,244,600,000,000, and the GDP per capita in the same year was $44,439. The purchasing parity was 15.94 trillion. The total force of the U.S. military was 1,431,400 soldiers. The U.S. spends 40% of the total amount of money spent globally on militaries, spent $691.22 billion in 2012 on the military, has 5,113 nuclear warheads, has lots of resources such as coal, copper, lead, molybdenum, phosphates, rare earth elements, uranium, bauxite, gold, iron, mercury, nickel, potash, silver, tungsten, zinc, natural gas, and timber. Also has the world's largest coal reserves with 491 billion short tons that make up for 27% of the world's coal supply. The U.S. in 2012 produced 25,308 billion cubic feet of natural gas. In the same year, produced 11,104.5053 thousand barrels of oil per day. And here, real quickly, is just a few charts showing graphically and with a map and how the U.S. spends their military and how also it's distributed with the world. Here also is multiple graphs showing the top graphs show the oil production of the United States and the oil production of Brazil, and the bottom ones show the natural gas production of the United States and of Brazil. Brazil has a population of 201,032,714 according to a 2013 estimate. Brazil was colonized by the Portuguese in the 1500s, gained their independence in 1815, became the modern democracy it is today on March 22nd, 1988, has the seventh wealthiest economy in the world, and has a total land area of 3,288 million square miles. Their GDP in 2012 was 2.253 trillion, which was the seventh largest in the world. Their GDP per capita in the same year was 12,210, which was the 84th in the world. Their purchasing power parity in 2013 was 2,422 billion. Their exports in 2011 totaled 256 billion, the 26th most in the world. There was a volume increase of 26.8% from the previous year, 2010, and their trade accounts for 25 to 30% of their economy. The total strength of their military was 327,710. They spend a total of 31,576 million, the 11th most in the world. Brazil does not possess nuclear weapons in accordance with the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Brazil's agricultural imports only accounted for 4.7% of imports in 2010. The cereal yield, kg per hectare, was 3,525.5 in 2009. Their fertilizer consumption, 100 grams per hectare of arable land, was 165.7 in 2008. The percentage of agricultural land that is available for farming was 32.5% of the land area in 2011. The percentage of people employed in agriculture was 15% in 2011, and the livestock production index of Brazil in 2011 was 119.3. The percentage of Brazil's GDP that agriculture occupied was 5%, and they are the fourth largest agricultural exporter in the world. Here's just real quickly a map of Brazil showing the various industries and also more specifically the agriculture industries in Brazil. There are many reasons that Brazil has been considered for possibly becoming a superpower. They have a very fast-growing agricultural sector. They occupy key nooks in global energy, agriculture, service, and some high-technology markets. Some of the trade policies that Brazil has put into place have been responsible for the growth of some of their domestic industries. The rise of multinational companies centered in Brazil has been another factor. Also, the government has adopted some key social programs. They have recently become a major exporter in the global economy. They have huge oil reserves, and they have one of the greenest economies in the world. They do need to address some challenges before they become a superpower. There are high poverty rates in Brazil. They have very protectionist trade policies. They have huge levels of economic inequality. There are countries objecting to Brazil trying to join the UN Security Council as a permanent member. There are low levels in education in comparison to the rest of the world. Brazil can produce large amounts of agriculture, uses cheap fuels such as ethanol, has cheaper labor costs than the more developed countries, but they're more productive, can step up to the world's growing food demands because of the increase in global population. The world is experiencing an increase in oil prices, but Brazil has adapted to this and makes sure their agriculture stays competitive. They produce for the world soil, chicken, coffee, beef, orange juice, and also tobacco. Ethanol has helped to reduce transportation costs in Brazil. They are capable of expanding their agricultural production and will lead to increased importance in the global agriculture market. Brazil has natural fuel resources such as bauxite, gold, iron ore, manganese, nickel, phosphates, platinum, tin, rare earth elements, uranium, hydropower, and timber. They produced in 2012 2,651.8941 thousand barrels of oil per day. Produced in 2012 598.2361 billion cubic feet of natural gas. Brazil has hydropower technique. They have specifically the Embracer with the airplane industry. The information technology sector in Brazil in 2011 was composed of around 73,000 companies and made a profit of 37 billion. The Brazilian government has an initiative to spend 250 million to step up their information technology sector. The goal is to train 50,000 new software engineers by 2014 and by 2022 to train 900,000. They have recently uncovered huge reserves of one of the most important resources in the global economy, oil. According to the International Energy Association, Brazil is set to become one of the top 10 net exporters of oil by 2015 if they maximize their potential. According to the IEA, Brazil could account for 1/3 of the world's oil supply if they step up. Brazil's most oil-rich region is the Libra Field. The Libra Field is estimated to hold between 8 and 12 million barrels of recoverable oil. The introduction of all this oil would greatly help lower the price of oil in the global economy. According to the IEA, the main thing that Brazil would have to do to make sure that this becomes a reality is to maintain investment of 90 million a year in their energy sector. Here are just some quick charts showing Brazil's oil production and also a map showing the Libra field. And here's also just a graph breaking down the energy. Brazil uses 78.8% hydroelectric energy. The world uses 16.7%. Other renewable fuels, Brazil uses 6.6%. The world uses 3.7%. Total fossil fuels, 11.9%. The world 66.6%. Nuclear, Brazil uses 2.7%, and the world uses 13.0%. One problem Brazil has to deal with is some of the government's trade policies. The government of Brazil has been enacting some protectionist trade policies. These policies were designed with the good intention of developing the companies. The problem with this is that although the companies may do good domestically, it doesn't properly prepare the companies to be competitive in the global market. Also, Brazil has problems with their education system. In 2010, they had a literacy rate of 90%. The average salary of a teacher in Brazil is $18,550 and this is much lower than what teachers make in the higher ranked countries. The education rates in Brazil have been rising over the past decade, but are still behind the average for OECD countries. Brazil is ranked 39th in the world for education. The percentage of people in 2011 from 25 to 64 years old that have obtained an upper secondary education was only 43%, compared to the OECD countries at 75%. Only 36 of 3 years and 57% of 4-year-olds were enrolled in early childhood programs in 2011, compared to the average for OECD countries of 67% and 85%. The enrollment rate of 5 to 14-year-olds was 95% in 2011, compared to the OECD average of 99%. The enrollment rate of 15 to 19-year-olds was 77%, compared to the OECD average of 84%. Brazil spent in 2010 5.6% of its GDP on education, compared to the OECD average of 6.3%. As a percentage of public expenditure, it was 18.1%, compared to the OECD average of 13%. The most obvious solution that Brazil has and should continue to pursue with this problem is to increase spending on education. Here is a picture of a protest in Brazil. The signs read, "Education, not corruption." In 2009, the population below the poverty line in Brazil was 21.4%. In 2011, the amount of people below the extreme poverty line was 4.2%. Brazil's unemployment rate in January 2014 was at 4.8%. The employment rate was 23.113%. The minimum wage is 724 Brazilian reals. Converted to US dollars, that is $308.12. The Brazilian government has started a program called Bolsa Familia. The program gives money to mothers living in poverty, and in return they have to ensure that their children go to school. Brazil also has the famous favelas. These favelas are poor slums in Brazil. The key solution to poverty that Brazil has been pursuing is to contribute money to welfare programs. In the last decade, Brazil has brought 40 million people out of poverty, and extreme poverty has been reduced by 89%. Here's just a quick picture, and the one on the left is actually a favela. The picture on the right is just 2 children living in poverty. Brazil has been trying to tackle its economic inequality for the next World Cup they're holding in 2014. Brazil ranks 121 out of 133 for economic inequality. They rank 125 out of 144 for trust in the ethical standards of politicians, rank 125 out of 190 for their healthcare, rank 107 out of 144 for their infrastructure, and these ranks are the various countries in the world. Brazil has put into law some steps that will help to lower economic inequality. Some steps include having a high minimum wage, controlling the price of gasoline, and also there are laws that make it harder for a business to fire an employee. One major part of this inequality is the fact that Brazil has some great private schools, but a lot of the public schools are very bad. Most families can't afford the tuition for these private schools. Some schools have tuition of $700 a month, and the annual salary of a family is $970. Brazil desires to become a regional power in Latin America, and that's not far from happening. By the end of 2009, Brazil's economy accounted for 40% of the GDP of Latin America and 55% of the GDP of South America. The goal of the Brazilian government is to further integrate Latin America and increase Brazilian aid to the poorer countries. Latin America's economy has improved since the 1990s, and Brazil has been the best positioned to take advantage of this. Mexico has played less of a role in Latin American politics since the 1990s. The United States has also started to exert less influence over Latin America. Brazilian firms are the most active investors in Latin America. Brazil has promoted uniting Latin America by promoting organizations such as Mercosur and the Southern Common Market. The current international order was founded after World War II, and the chief architect of this current system was the United States. The current system is focused on international liberalism with an emphasis on the United Nations. There are realist elements in this international order, such as the UN's ability to create an army if voted upon. Brazil has a much more pacifist attitude to the international order. Brazil believes in using military force as a last resort. Brazil has been trying to gain a permanent seat on the UN Security Council for 50 years. President Lula of Brazil argued in 2008 to the UN General Assembly, "Today's structure has been frozen for 6 decades and does not relate to the challenges of today's world. Its distorted form of representation stands between us and the multilateral world which we aspire." Brazil tried to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council at the Yalta Conference. This was stopped by the United Kingdom and the Soviet Union. There is also resistance from every country in South America, except for Venezuela and Honduras, to Brazil becoming a permanent Security Council member. Mexico, Argentina, and Colombia have all joined a coalition called the Coffee Club, and then later changed its name to United for Consensus to oppose Brazil becoming a permanent member. Russia and China, 2 permanent members to the Security Council, oppose reforming the Security Council. One veto from any of these 5 permanent members will stop any sort of reform. This is just a picture of President Lula of Brazil when he gave that speech that I just recently quoted. And Brazil could greatly affect future World Trade Organization negotiations because of its protectionist nature. Could possibly block U.S. attempts at trade liberalization. Could also make the rest of the world try to make their agricultural economies more efficient or just simply produce more. Thank you for watching my presentation today.